Then you can start.
Thank you. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay, welcome all. Very good morning. So myself Adityan, and I am in Salesforce ecosystem for around 7 years and a quarter, and I'm holding 10 certifications. I am also into blogging and also into LinkedIn. I kept those links over here. You can pay a visit to my blog and send a network connection over LinkedIn to discuss further anything related to Salesforce. So let's get into today's topic, which is asynchronous Apex. So when we hear the word asynchronous, whenever we see something called as async, we will be in a state to really not give a complete definition of it. Async is always the misunderstood word. Async could be defined in multiple ways, but when we speak about asynchronous in Salesforce terminology or in any programming world, let me tell you, the good word for us to relate to is parallel. Async means parallel. Think like this. Okay, now you can ask me, okay, what is parallel and how is parallel able to define what async is all about. Now let's assume that you are trying to do some job which is including 10 tasks. You're trying to do some job which is including 10 tasks. If those 10 tasks are performed in a serial manner, means first task is initiated, first task is completed, then start the second task. Second task is initiated, second task is completed, do the third task, third task is completed, then start the fourth task. If you see, you're trying to do them in a serial manner. For the second task to get started, it has to wait for the first task to get completed. For the third one to get started, it has to wait for the second one to get completed. And in the same way, for the 10th task to get started, it has to wait for the 9th one to get completed. If you see, second task is in sync with the first task's completion. Third task is in sync with the second task's completion. So everything is being executed in a serial manner, in a serialized pattern. The execution is happening. But if you feel that no, there are 10 tasks for me, yes, I understand, but 10 tasks can be executed independently. They can be executed in parallel. They don't really have to wait for the result of its previous task. They don't have to wait for the result of its previous task. They can be executed independently. They can be executed in parallel. In such a scenario, asynchronous Apex will be coming into rescue. This is what async Apex is all about. It is more like multiple tasks that are independent of each other and are executing in parallel. Now let us take one real-time example which we can relate to and then understand it in a better way. Now for any ideal person, a day starts like this. So once he wakes up, let's assume that there is an employee who is going to office, and his basically day-to-day activities are like this. So once he wakes up, so what he should do is he need to take a shower, and for taking a shower it will take a time of around 30 minutes. Once shower is done, he need to cook for his breakfast, which will take around 15 minutes, and then he should eat the food, which will take around 15 minutes, and then he should charge his mobile. He should charge his mobile, and charging his mobile will take around 30 minutes. Charging his mobile will take around 30 minutes, and then he will be moving to his office. Now he understood that if he is trying to do everything, the total time that he is actually needing is 90 minutes. But he felt that because I have to first do my shower in order to start my cooking. I cannot start cooking before doing shower. I have to do my shower, only then I should do my cooking. I cannot eat without cooking. Obviously my eat is dependent on cooking and my cook is dependent on shower. But whereas when I look at charge, I don't really think charge is dependent on any of these three things. So why don't I remove this charge from here and execute it in parallel? Let the charge happen behind the scenes. Let the charge be happening in the background. I don't really have to monitor the charging of it. It can happen completely in the background. If I do this, then if you see, the overall time that I need is just 60 minutes. I just reduced the time that is actually needed for completion of my activities by segregating them, which has to be executed in a serialized manner and what has to be executed in a parallel manner. Now if you see here, for this complete monitoring is required, because cook cannot be done unless shower is done. It cannot be started unless cook is done. For this, complete monitoring is required. But whereas when we look at charging, we don't need any monitoring. If you just put charger to your mobile and if you turn on the switch, then yes, fine, you can completely focus on these things. Always keep in mind that if at all you feel for a specific action or for a specific job, user presence is not needed. It can do the job by itself parallelly, and it is completely independent of all other jobs. In such scenarios, you can incline towards the approach of leveraging the concept of asynchronous apex. Okay, fine. This scenario in real time is good, but why should we actually use this in apex? Why should we use this in apex? In which kind of what is the exact scenario that will really demand us to make use of asynchronous apex rather than synchronous apex? Okay, before that, let us try to understand the difference between synchronous apex and asynchronous apex in an elaborative way. Now, the moment you click on a button, the moment you are trying to save a record, validation rule will fire immediately. The moment you click on save button of a specific record, when you are trying to save a record, validation rule will fire immediately. If there is a trigger will fire immediately. Process builder, flows, whatever event centric components we see in the order of execution table, everything will get fired immediately. There is no delay. Okay, that is one side. Now let's look into another example. Let us take a record where you are trying to submit it for approval. The moment you open a record and click on this button submit for approval, what will happen? Immediately the record will be submitted for approval. It will happen instantly. Okay, let us put that aside. Now let's take one more example. You are trying to perform a net banking transaction. You are trying to perform a transaction. But the thing with this transaction is, you're not using any UPI service, you're using net banking, and you're using the very traditional way of doing a transfer by making use of NEFT. And NEFT clearly mentioned that the transactions can happen only in between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Any transaction you do after 5 p.m. will be processed in the next day. Any transaction you perform after 5 p.m. will be done or will be handled in the next day. So now let us take an example that you are trying to do a transaction by sending some money to a person exactly at 6 p.m. You have initiated the transaction, but when will the execution actually happen? Okay, I'm trying to tell is, now there is a window frame given by the bank stating that any transactions that are started in between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. will be processed instantly. But if you try to do anything after 5 p.m. or before 9 a.m., they will be handled only within this window frame. Your request will be placed in a queue. And once our server restores or once we resume our server, only then your request will be handled. Now you are trying to make a transaction at around 5:30 p.m. You logged into your net banking and you started, but for the amount to get credited into your friend's account, you have to wait for the next day 9 a.m. and only then you can check with your friend if the amount was actually credited into his account or not. Why? Because there is a time frame stating that any request only within this time will be handled. Okay, let us take one more example. You have called a customer care for some complaint, and they will give you a tone stating that your request is placed on queue and the position in queue is 3. Our agents are currently busy assisting other customers. Please stay in queue. Though you have initiated a request, your request is not being handled immediately. You are being kept on a queue, and once the agents become free, only then your request will be handled. But your request initiation happened long back only, but still your request is placed on a queue. In the same way, in Salesforce also, you might initiate the job now itself, but the execution of the job will happen once the resources will become free, which means the moment you click on a button, the execution will not happen instantly. For the execution to take place, there could be some delay. Let us assume that you are trying to click on a button, but the action that should happen behind the scenes is not happening immediately. That is happening after few minutes or after few seconds, but that depends on the resource availability of Salesforce. But so far, what all we have seen, apex trigger or apex trigger or validation rules or process builders or workflows, neither of them are asynchronous. Everything what all we have seen is completely synchronous. Now Okay, till now you are telling me that everything is synchronous. Now, how can I make something asynchronous? Means yes, there are some points, there are some syntax that are to be followed in order to tell to the system that okay, this is something which I want the system to understand that it should be executed in a asynchronous way, but not in a synchronous way. There are some syntax to be followed. As we have not seen any such specific syntax yet, everything what all we have done is being executed in a synchronous way. I think this will really help us to understand what synchronous and what asynchronous is all about. Now, what are the actual advantages of asynchronous apex? Yes, I understood that it is reducing me the time because I am able to do something in parallel. But what are the actual advantages of asynchronous apex? Means asynchronous apex will provide you higher governor limits. Asynchronous apex governor limits are entirely different with the synchronous governor limits, and that is one thing. Second thing, okay, if they are providing me higher governor limits, then I will make everything asynchronous. What is the drawback for me? I can go for asynchronous apex all the time, right? Why should I go for synchronous apex? Means there are some limitations in asynchronous apex as well. There are some limitations. Okay, what are those limitations? Before I speak about limitations, let me tell you few points on higher governor limits. Normally, when you try to perform a transaction, which is synchronous in nature, that transaction should be done in 1 minute. No, in 10 seconds. 10,000 milliseconds is the limit that we have for synchronous. Within 10,000 milliseconds only the transaction should be done. If it is taking beyond 10,000 milliseconds, then you will be getting an error, CPU timeout. You will be getting an error called CPU timeout exception, because whatever action that is happening behind the scenes in this transaction is consuming more time. Any transaction should be done within 10 seconds. If it is consuming more than 10 seconds, everything will be rolled back. But whereas when you're trying to perform some action using asynchronous apex, you are given 60,000 milliseconds, which means you almost have 1 complete minute to perform your job. But whereas here you're having just 10 seconds, but if you see here, you're having almost like 1 minute to complete your job. So the governor limits when compared with synchronous are obviously higher, but again there are some limitations with asynchronous apex. So you have to really cross check yourself for the requirement. Can this be implemented by using synchronous or asynchronous? If synchronous, why? If asynchronous, why? So make a table and then you will be able to understand if it should be done in a synchronous way or in an asynchronous way. Okay. Now, what is the biggest limitation that we actually have to worry about, or what is the drawback that we have to worry about while going for asynchronous apex? Means remember that if you look into this example, this is completely independent of any of these activities, and this doesn't need any user presence. In the same way, if there is no user interaction required, which means you don't have to show if there is an error, you don't have to show. If it is successful, you don't have to show. User doesn't need to be notified. User doesn't have to be aware of what happened behind the scenes. Only in those scenarios, go for asynchronous apex. As part of asynchronous apex, if you are trying to insert a record which is holding erroneous data, user will not know that the record insertion got failed, because this is happening in parallel, this is happening behind the scenes. You will never know what is the status of your job at the UI level. So that is one drawback. But whereas in synchronous apex, error will be coming on the screen itself, so you'll get to know okay, something went wrong. But if you see here, as this is happening behind the scenes, as this is happening in parallel, where user is not paying any attention, you will not get to know if that is correct or not. Now for the same example, let us assume that you woke up like just in a normal day, and for this specific scenario you kept charger to your mobile but you forgot to turn on the switch. Now when will you get to know that the mobile has not charged yet? After eating, and when you go and collect your mobile, at that point of time only you will get to know that your mobile is not charged yet. Reason being, because it is being executed in parallel and is not really demanding any user interaction or user presence, you will not get to know the status of the job. Unless you go and explicitly see it, you will not get to know the status of it. But whereas when you do shower, obviously the moment you open the shower, if there is no water in the tank, you will get to know, so you can go and turn on the water. And while cooking, if you feel that okay, there is something which is needed, you can immediately get it done. While eating also, if you feel that okay, some salt has to be added, you can immediately do it, because you're present over here and you're doing something and your interaction is very much needed. due to which synchronous apex will give you the status so easily. But whereas when we speak about asynchronous apex, you have to go and explicitly check what is the status of it. Status won't be shown to the user on the screen itself. That is one big drawback, due to which always go for asynchronous apex if you feel that user don't have to know what is happening. Only in such scenarios go for asynchronous apex. Let us take one big example so that we can actually understand when should I go for asynchronous apex. There is a user is trying to insert an account record. User is trying to insert an account record. I have a trigger written on account that will insert an opportunity. I have a trigger on account that is actually inserting an opportunity. Fine. There is a process builder written on opportunity that will insert a contact. There is a flow written on contact that will actually insert an activity. And there is a trigger on activity that will actually send out an email. If you see here, what is the user actually trying to do? He is just trying to save an account record. But unfortunately, on account, there are many triggers. It is not just one trigger, there are many triggers, and due to which, just for the sake of the event centric components on account to get executed, it took time of around 5 seconds. And then for opportunity, it took time of around 3 seconds. Ideally, it won't be this long, but just to make it clear, I'm taking some high timelines. Usually it won't take this long. And for contact, it took 2 seconds. Now let us say 3 seconds. And for contact, it took 3 seconds. And by the time it comes to activity, it is still taking 3 seconds. But unfortunately, we have only 10 seconds as the time limit for us. And due to which, this particular logic, when the system comes to this particular logic, it has already exceeded the time. As it has exceeded the time, then what will happen? Will it just stop here? No, because we follow atomicity. Either do it completely or roll back completely. Everything will be rolled back. What is the user actually trying to do here? User is just trying to insert an account, and just because we are trying to do something under opportunities contacts activity, we are getting an error. At this point of time, what we can do is, let us tell to the system that okay, once opportunity insertion is done, just consider that as one transaction. Now how much time is needed here? Just 8 seconds is enough. Once this is done, let the other steps be performed asynchronously. Let all of this happen asynchronously, because user don't really have to go and check the activity immediately. I am fine even if there is some delay. Let the user insert his account first and let the opportunity be created, because he will be looking at the opportunity immediately. Once opportunity is created, let the contact creation, activity creation, and the email sending part be happening in parallel. Let it happen, because I don't really have to worry about them, because that is not something which is concerning the user. But if I have everything written in a single transaction, the basic scenario of account insertion itself is failing. So now, as just splitting your transaction into multiple things, now the total time is actually, here it is 6 seconds. But we have how much time left for this? For asynchronous, we have 60 seconds. I mean, we have 60 seconds, but whereas for synchronous, we have 10 seconds, and nowhere we are exceeding the limit. We are still getting our job done by executing few things parallelly. Just because we changed our approach towards the execution of few things, we are getting our job done. So this is how asynchronous Apex actually works. Now I will take few examples to make it clear. Let us go into the PPT. Okay. So what is asynchronous apex? Asynchronous apex is something which will be executed in parallel and is independent of other operations. That is what asynchronous apex is all about. It runs completely in background without being in sync with what end user is doing, which means the moment you place a request, it will not be handled immediately, but your request or whatever action you try to perform will be executed once the resources become available, which means what do you mean by resources? Resources are nothing but, for every operation you perform, Salesforce has to do something or the other. In the Salesforce server, there will be some resources which will do the job for you. So once they become available, then immediately your execution happens. It depends on the availability of resources. If the resources are available immediately, then yes, your job will be done immediately. But if they take some time for the resources to become available, then there could be some delay in your job as well. When should this be used? It should be used when user interaction is not at all needed, which means user is not waiting for the output. User doesn't have to see the status of the job. Only in such scenarios go for user interaction. And second thing, for splitting the transaction, because we are hitting the governor limits, what we'll be trying to do, we will try to move some of our logic into asynchronous apex, and thus we are actually splitting the transaction. And we know that for asynchronous apex, the governor limits are higher. So whenever you see that you are hitting the governor limits and you want to implement something with higher governor limit, you can go for asynchronous apex. So this is all about asynchronous apex in a nutshell. But the bottom line is asynchronous apex always gets executed behind the scenes, and it will be in parallel. The execution will be in parallel. Then what are the ways to implement asynchronous apex? Yes, we understood what asynchronous apex is all about. What are the ways, or how can I actually tell to the system that this has to be executed asynchronously, not like just any other means? There are different ways that are made available for us. These are the four ways of making apex to get executed in a asynchronous way. These are the four ways for us. What is the first one? Future. Second one, queuable. Third one, schedulable. And fourth one is batchable. Okay, fine. Let us go through each of them to understand them in a better way. These are the four ways. Now, first one, what is future? Future is an annotation that will be applied for a method. Okay, what is this annotation? We have never seen annotation till now. We might have not seen annotation till now. I cannot say we never seen. What is an annotation? Annotation is more like a keyword. Annotation is more like a keyword, but it will be prefixed with something called as at the rate. It will be prefixed with something called as at the rate. If aura session was done, you would have understood that there is something called as aura enabled. For any method, you have to specify something called as aura enabled for the method to get executed from your aura component. If you write a method, no matter even if you make it as public or even if you make it as global, aura component cannot call that method unless that method is having this annotation called aura enabled. You have to explicitly tell that I am enabling this method for a aura component, for a lightning component. You have to explicitly tell this. This is an annotation that has to be placed before the method. In the same way, for a method to get executed asynchronously, if you feel that okay, I have my one method, I wrote one method, but I want this method to get executed asynchronously, then also you have to specify an annotation, and that annotation name is future. When you say at the rate future before a method, then system will immediately understand that okay, I have to execute this asynchronously. This is something which will be executed in parallel, and this is something for which user interaction is not at all required. This is what. Okay, now can I make at the rate feature for all the methods? No, there are some prerequisites. There are few things to be taken into consideration before making a method future. What are they? Method must be static. You cannot add future for a non-static method. Okay, why is this? I understand that static is a keyword which I can make use of, but why only for static and why not for non-static? Always remember that when you are speaking about execution of a method which is non-static, you are dealing with a instance of the class. You are dealing with instance of a class, and yesterday we found that for the trigger recursion to get avoided, we have to make use of a static variable. Why are we making use of static variable? Because because static variable is binded with the class but not with the instance. Instance will get initialized, and once the instance initialization happens, then values will be lost. If you create multiple instances of a class, second instance is independent of first instance, third instance is independent of the other two instances, due to which we cannot make use of instance. We have to use the class level variable only. In the same way, for the method to get executed, you will never know when the method execution actually happens. You know that when you have to initiate the transaction, but you will never know when the actual execution happens. As you never know when the actual execution happens, and you will be unsure if the instance will still be available by then or not. Once your transaction is done, all your instances will be released automatically. So the instance may be available or may not be available, due to which it is always recommended to make you, it's not recommended, it's a prerequisite that you have to keep your method static. Now, what is advantage if you keep it as static? You are not depending on instance of the class at all. It is just a class name dot method name. Even if the instance is available or even if the instance is not available, we are not worrying, because we are using class name here. Class name dot method name is the syntax that we will be following in order to execute a method that is asynchronous. I mean, that is static. Okay, the first thing is the method must be static. And second thing, method must not return anything. It should be of type void. Okay, why void? Why should it not return anything? Think like this. You have started execution, you have started initiation of a method now. The execution might happen after 3 minutes. If the method is returning you something back, you have to be waiting for it, or you have to be looking at it. But that beats the whole purpose of asynchronous apex. Asynchronous apex clearly states that use it only when user interaction is not needed. Use it only when user interaction is not needed. And now you are telling that if I have to return you something, then obviously user interaction is needed. If the method is returning you something, means you are collecting it and holding it somewhere. But that's not the definition of asynchronous apex. So asynchronous apex cannot return you anything, because you will never know when will the execution takes place and when can it return anything to you. Third one, can accept only primitive data types as parameters. It can be either a default method or a parameterized method. But if it is a parameterized method, the prerequisite here is it can accept only primitive data types. We know what primitive data types are. Primitive data types are the data types which cannot be broken down further. We have seen about the data types in our earlier session. Only primitive data types are allowed. Okay. Why only primitive data types and why not as objects? Is there any reason for that? Means yes, let us assume that you are trying to send an opportunity instance to a future method. You're trying to send an opportunity instance. When the future job is kept in queue, the opportunity stage name is qualification. But by the time the future job execution takes place, the opportunity stage has been changed to some other value. So the reference that the future method is holding is different with the data that is present now. So accuracy is being missed here. So due to which, in order to keep it accurate or in order to avoid discrepancies, it is recommended, it's not recommended, it is made as a prerequisite that only primitive data types are accepted for a future method as a parameter. You cannot send non-primitive data types. So when I say primitive data types, string, integer, double, boolean, the basic data types which cannot be broken down further are the only data types that are allowed to be sent as parameters to a future method. So this is what a future method is all about. Now let us do one hands-on example to understand it better. So let me quickly log in. So I will take a very basic example because there are many other topics to cover. I will take basic examples only. Okay. I have just created a normal class by name activities. This is just a normal class. Now what I will do is I will create one method for shower, one method for cook, one method for eat, and one method for charge. Okay, let me do that quickly. Public void. I'm not making them as static for now. I'm just normally making them void, or let me make it a static only, so I don't really have to rewrite the code again. Public void take shower. System.debug shower. Okay, done. So I have not done much here. So what I did was I have created one method by name perform activities. If you see, there are 4 activities to be done. Let me put it in this order only. Okay, I have 4 activities to be done. What are they? First, take shower, charge mobile, cook food, eat food. Now let me just call this specific, and in each method I have added a system.debug. In each method I have added a system.debug. Now what I will do is I will go to anonymous block and I will call this specific method to see how the operation is actually happening. So I'm coming to perform activities and I'm clicking on execute. As this is a static method, I can say class name dot method name. So what am I just trying to do here? I'm just calling this method, and this method is internally calling 4 methods, and in all these 4 methods I'm having corresponding system.debug, so that I will get to know how are they getting executed. So I'm just clicking on execute now. Debug log got generated. I don't really want to look at everything, so I'm just clicking on debug only. If you see, first shower got present, yes, take shower is there, so due to which first shower got done. Then charge mobile, okay, then charge mobile. Once charge mobile is completed, only then I am seeing cooking, and once cooking is done, only then I am seeing eating. And also, just as a proof, if you see, there is only one debug log, because in earlier sessions I made a point stating that for every transaction you do, there will be one log that gets generated. As this is just only one transaction, as I have clicked on execute, it is just only one transaction. I'm seeing only one log that got generated. Now what we will do is, we understood that charging mobile can be executed asynchronously in parallel. Now let us come to charge mobile, and we will just say at the rate future. That's it. You don't have to do any other thing. Just say at the rate future, and make sure that it is following all the prerequisites. Is this method static? Yes, it is static. Is it void? Yes, it is void. If is it default method or parameters method, it is default method, then fine. But if it is parameters method, make sure that you are passing only parameters of primitive data types. Non-primitive data types are not allowed. Okay, fine. Now we have everything. We did not make any change. Whatever is happening, yes, that will still go on. But this time we were telling to the system to execute this in asynchronous manner. Now let me call the same thing, and remember that I have already opened this debug log, due to which under read you are seeing it blank. Now I'm clicking on execute again. Now ideally only one log should get generated, correct? But if you see how many logs got generated, 2 logs got generated. And if you look into the operation, one operation is telling that execute anonymous, but whereas the other operation is telling something like future handler. Now this is kind of evident for us to understand that, okay, there are two transactions that happened. Two transactions happened over here. Let me go to this execute anonymous and let me click on debug only. If I see here, only shower, cooking and eating are there in a serial way. After shower, I see that, okay, cooking job was done. After cooking, eating job was done. Now let me open this future handler and let me see what is present over here. Only charge mobile is present. So now we understood that, okay, if we add at the rate future for a specific method, that will be handled as part of a new transaction, and it is completely executed in parallel with this, so that you are getting governor limits specifically for this transaction alone, and those limits are also higher, and normal governor limits will be applied to this. This is how future method actually works. Now what I will do is, I will try to keep it in a different way. Now I wanted to say create account, create opportunity, create contact. Okay, I'm just having 3 methods now. Now what I want is account to get created, opportunity to get created, and contact to get created. I want account creation and opportunity creation to be synchronous, and contact creation to be done completely asynchronously. That is what I want. So let me remove everything here. Create account, okay, create opportunity, create contact. I have written 3 methods now. This time I'm trying to do DMLs, because with system debugs we understood how they're getting executed, but now we are actually trying to do something in real time. Okay, so in create account, let me write the code to insertion of an account. I believe everyone is aware on the logic that I'm writing here. We have covered this in our earlier sessions. Is equal to, I will just say that sync account, and then I am inserting this obj acc. Okay, fine. Now for this create opportunity, I will write a SQL query to get this specific account, though it is not ideal, but still to make it clear, I am writing account obj acc is equal to select id from account. Why? Where name is equal to, I know that name is sync account, so I'm using the same, where name is equal to sync account, and I'm also adding limit 1 because the basic nature of a so-called query is to return you list of records. List of account will be returned, but this is capable of holding only one record, due to which I explicitly have to mention limit 1. Now I will try to insert the opportunity. So opportunity obj opp is equal to new opportunity. Obj opp dot name is equal to sync opportunity. Obj opp dot stage name is equal to, I'm just randomly populating some values for all the mandatory fields so that I will not see any error. Close date is equal to system dot today. Then I am just inserting this opportunity. Okay, fine. Now here comes our hero. In the create contract, I have to insert a contact record. Again, I'm writing a so-called query. This is very not a very good way of writing it, but still I am writing it in order to see the limits. Now what I will do is I will insert contact for this specific account. Contact obj con is equal to new contact. Obj con dot account id is equal to, here I missed the statement. I have to associate this opportunity with that account, else it will throw an error. Is equal to obj acc dot id. Here obj con dot account id is equal to obj acc dot id. Obj con dot, and I am explicitly wantedly doing this. First name is equal to sync, and then I am trying to say obj con. Okay, this is what I am doing. For now I am commenting this specific line. Let us see how is the execution happening synchronously, then we will see how will the execution happen asynchronously. So what am I trying to do here? I am just calling one method, and in this method there are three methods that are getting called internally. In the very first method we are doing DML on one account object. In the second method we have one so-called query and one DML statement. In the third method we have one so-called query and one DML statement. So let me just call the same method. So in this class I'm calling this method, and all three are being executed synchronously. Let me see how many resources will be utilized for this. When I click on execute, what happened? Transaction did not happen successfully. I got an error stating that there is one field missing. When you are trying to insert a contact record, last name is a mandatory field, and as you have not filled the field, as you have not filled value for last name field, transaction cannot be processed, and everything is synchronous. So I follow the concept of atomicity here, either do everything or roll everything back, and here I see an error, due to which I am rolling back everything. Okay, fine. Now let me correct this record. Obj con dot last name is equal to contact. Let me close this. Let me close other things so that we can be clear on what has to be done. I'm closing everything. Now I'm executing the same logic again. Okay, this time I can see that the status is success and log has generated and no error came up. Now let me click on debug only. Okay, I have not given any debug statement, due to which I do not see it. Now what I will do is I will scroll down completely in order to see the resource utilization, how many were done. Okay, I see that there are 7 SQL queries that got executed. Now you might be wondering, how come 7 SQL queries got executed? We have written one SQL query over here, second SQL query over here, only 2 should come up, but why are 7 SQL queries coming up here? Means at this point of time you have to understand that there are event centric components written, there are triggers written, and triggers will get executed whenever DML happens. And as the trigger execution is happening behind the scenes, there are some SQL queries written in your triggers, due to which the query count got increased. And that is the reason why, if you remember, the whole point of writing trigger is to keep it in a bulkified way, because you will never know how many DMLs will happen in a transaction. If your trigger is not written by taking bulkification into consideration, immediately it will fail. So just because we have triggers in place, I see that SQL query count is 7, and out of 50,000 only 6 came. This is very less, so we are good on that. How come 5 DML statements got executed? We have only 3 DMLs, means again there are triggers, because in the trigger you are trying to do DML, and trigger execution happens whenever you try to do a DML. So due to which the DML count is also more now. Okay, fine. But nevertheless, we see that the transaction is successful. Let us quickly go and verify if the corresponding account record is, yes, I see that sync account is present. And if I scroll down to this sync account, I see sync contact is present and sync opportunity is also present. Okay. Now let us do the same thing by making it asynchronously. Or let me do one thing. Let me make opportunity creation asynchronous. Let me make opportunity creation asynchronous and let the contact creation happen like this. And what I will do is, first I will create a successful transaction like a happy path. Then I will try to keep some erroneous data and we will see how the system will behave. So now I'm again calling the data, same method this time. And if you see here, how many logs got generated again? 2 logs got generated. You can see the time. Maybe I'll expand this column. You can see that 2 logs got generated with just 1 second delay. Just 1 second delay. We can see 2 logs got generated, but earlier only 1 log got generated. Now we can see that with 1 second delay, 2 logs got generated. Let me open the synchronous log. Means the log that got generated the moment I clicked on execute. Let me scroll down and let me look into the number of resources consumed. If I see earlier, the number of SQL queries are 7 in count, but this time they are just 3 in count. Earlier I found the DML statements are 5 in count, but this time I see only 3 in count because one DML, whatever I'm trying to do, has been moved into asynchronous path, due to which the execution happened as part of a different transaction, and so my limits or the resources that I have consumed in this transaction have reduced to some extent. Okay, now let me open the future handler log. In this future handler log, if I scroll down, I can see that, okay, SQL queries are 4 in count and DML statements are 2 in count. Earlier, I see that 4 plus 3 is 7 if I do everything in a single transaction. 2 plus 3, 5 in a single transaction. But now I have splitted the transactions, due to which I'm actually in a good shape now. Okay, as because I have splitted it, I'm in a good shape. Now, if you observe this carefully, here I'm having 3 out of 100 because in a single transaction you cannot execute more than 100 SQL queries. But this is a asynchronous log. In the asynchronous log, if you see, the limit is 200, which means in a single transaction you can execute 200 SQL queries if it is asynchronous. But if it is synchronous, you have only 100 SQL queries. And in the same way, if you see here, maximum CPU time is 60,000 over here, but if you see maximum CPU time is just 10,000. 10,000 is millisecond is the unit here. So 10,000 milliseconds for a synchronous transaction, 60,000 milliseconds for a asynchronous transaction. This is how asynchronous transaction is actually working. You might feel that, okay, this is pretty much good, helping me to utilize, helping me to really segregate the transactions if at all I'm hitting the governor limits. But now let me show you the drawbacks here. I know that stage name is a mandatory field while creation of an opportunity. I know that stage name is a mandatory field while creation of an opportunity, and I am trying to comment this. Now I will call the same method. Now assume that because we are developers, we are looking into the debug logs. But end users, will they look into debug logs? No, they will not look into debug logs. The moment they click on a button, some action will happen and they will assume that, okay, the action went smooth. Now I just click on execute. Now assume that I do not have access to debug logs. I'm not looking at debug logs. Okay. Now what will my impression be? My impression is that, okay, account record insertion went successfully. So let me quickly go and see how did that go. Now I'm opening the very recent account and I see that account is present. Contact. Wait, what happened? Future handler insertion failed. What are we trying to do here? Opportunity is there and we are trying to associate it with sync account. Okay, I understood what might have happened. I will do one thing. I will try to delete all the accounts that I have created today, because I'm telling sync account where name is equal to sync account. There are 3 records with same name. If you see, there are 3 records with same name, and system might have picked any account for associating the contact. So what I will do is I will change the name now. Rather than deleting, I will try to change the name now. Sync account test. I'll put the name sync account test, so that it will be easy for us to understand if the corresponding records are created successfully or not. So I'm keeping it as sync account test. Now I will just re-perform the transaction again one more time. I'm calling the same block. Okay, it happened. Now let me come to the accounts and let me see how did it go. Sync account test is there. Okay, fine. And if I open sync account test and if I scroll down, I see contact is present, but opportunity is not present. And we cannot tell to the customer to go and check your debug logs. That is very, very bad way. Okay, then how should we do it now? then what you have to do is there is a way to see the status of your jobs. How can we do this? Means in even Lightning or Classic, the way is still the same. There is something called as quick find for you. Open setup, and in the quick find, just type Apex jobs. Just type Apex jobs, and you can see an entry called Apex jobs over here. Open that. And if you open this, immediately it will show you all the asynchronous Apex jobs that are in place. It could be done, or it could be in progress, or it could have been not started yet. They will all be shown to you in the Apex jobs page. Come to quick find and just type Apex jobs, and that will show you the list of jobs that are being executed or that have been executed. Now we see that for future there is a required field missing by, and the field name is stage, due to which this has failed. Okay, and if you also scroll to the right, you can also see that it was submitted by who, at what point of time was this done, and in which class, which method is this actually all about. This is providing me some details, but unfortunately I am I am not a very good user. I clicked on this button multiple times. I clicked on button for multiple records multiple times. Now I don't know which one is completed and which one is not completed. I have clicked on button for different records. For few records I gave valid data, and for few records I have given invalid data. Now I wanted to see for which record it was failed and for which record it was successful. Now that is very difficult now. If you open asynchronous jobs, I mean if you open Apex jobs, you can see status of all the jobs, but they will not give you enough information about which job it is all about. There is no way. Though if you see for everything it is just the same class, same method, it will be hard for you to track the status of your job. I might be looking for some specific job, but now after I come here I'm so confused which job is mine. I don't know, because I have initiated many jobs. I don't know which job do I have to look at. It is difficult for me. Though there is a job ID, I will not be aware of what my job ID is all about. I understand that job ID is something which is unique here, but job ID is not something which I am aware of, because I'm just clicking on a button and that is doing the job for me. I don't know what is a job ID that is really allocated for my job. Now how can I do this? Means this is one such limitation in a future method. Though future method is really very great, you don't really have to make much changes. Just say at the rate future before your method and it will take care of everything. But the problem is it will not really give you accurate status of your job, because you might not be really aware of your job ID. There is no way for you to really get to know about your job ID. So this is one such limitation. And second limitation is you cannot call one future method from another future method. That is again one more drawback. Chaining is what we call. Chaining is not possible in future methods. So these are the two drawbacks that we have for a future method. Now let's go into the slides. So this is the syntax that has to be followed: public, static, void, and then provide your method name, and then whatever statements you wanted to give those statements, and everything will be executed in an asynchronous pattern. Now, how do we have to invoke a future method? Though it is async, it is still a method with a static keyword. So the syntax, there is no change. You're just calling it like any other static method. Just say class name dot method name. That's it. Then what are the limitations of future method? We cannot do chaining here. Means one future method cannot call another future method. Only primitive data types are supported as a parameter. And third one is it is difficult to track the status of a job. These are the limitations of your future method. Now, with these limitations taken into consideration, there comes our next asynchronous Apex approach, where all these three have been completely overcome, and that is nothing but queuable. Future is our first asynchronous approach. Second one is queuable.